Hey everybody, how you doing? Today we're going to talk about what is arguably the most well-documented UFO case in the world. And there's been many, Jay. And I know myself, I'm an enthusiast on these cases, but until you speak to somebody who's a witness, and that's very hard to do. How many actual UFO encounter military people are still alive that have interesting stories? So we're talking about Rendlesham Forest today. For many of you that are familiar with the story, I think you might get some new insights from John. He also has some new projects involving UAPs and military. His insights are unique. They're a little different than what a lot of our guests think. We're going to ask him all the questions, and we're also going to ask him to explain what happened from his perspective. And I've also read varying accounts from some of his cohorts that were there as well, too. So maybe he can clarify that. I'm excited, Jay. It's UFO Sunday. You ready to go?
Absolutely. I'm ready to go when you are.
Good. And good news. We are now a part of the UnX network. We're very proud to be joining a roster of amazing other shows. You can check them out, unxnetwork.com. And UAP Studies Podcast will be on there after February 12th. And our weekly slot will be Sundays at 11 p.m. And of course, you can always find us on our YouTube channel, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And with that, we'll be right back with Mr. John Burroughs here on UAP Studies Podcast.
Let's do it.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of UAP Studies Podcast. My name is Louis Borges. Joining me, as always, my best buddy, Jason Gilmet. How are you?
I'm good. You're also my best buddy. You know, we spend a lot of time together throughout the week, just texting and messaging like every day. So if people wonder if we just get together on Sundays, no, we talk the whole friggin' week. And
that's right. Yeah, it is a lot of hard work. And good news to our following and everybody that enjoys our show. We are now going to be broadcast on the UnX network. That just came together, and we're very excited. There's a lot of good shows, high caliber, fact-based people like ourselves. So February 12th is our launch. Check out unxnetwork.com, and we're happy to have a new home. So that brings me to today's guest. Normally, we're talking about people that are researchers, our media, TV-based people. It's not very often you get an actual experiencer and something of, a case of this size. I mean, Rendlesham Forest is arguably the world's best documented UFO case. And we have Mr. John Burroughs on the show here today. So welcome, Mr. John Burroughs, first of all.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure, sir. Again, I know you've probably told your story ad nauseum, but a lot of people maybe don't know the specifics, or it's easy to blend in facts from other cases and kind of get a cloudy judgment of that. So, December 26, 1980, 3 a.m. What happened?
Well, Rendlesham's an interesting story because it's been branded as the British Roswell incident because, obviously it happened outside a military location. Military was involved. We were on duty and I was riding around my supervisor at that point, and in the night, he was new to the base. So we were just chatting back and forth. When he saw something strange in the sky coming down into the forest, he got my attention and asked me if I'd seen anything like that before. And I said, no, I've been there for over a year and a half, been, on patrol numerous thousands of times or whatever, down in that area. I've been on the gate at night. So I've never seen anything quite like that. So it went into the forest itself. It was his call what we did. We decided to go off, open up the back gate and go down the road that led to a T, which you go left towards Bentwaters or right towards the British Village. I don't remember the name of it. But the forest was right across the road. And you could see into the forest, you could see strange lights like red, green, blue, white. And so he kind of did a half U-turn, let me open the door. As I got out of the vehicle, it just seemed strange. There was like electricity in the air. Everything seemed, I don't know if it was slower, but it just felt different. So at that point, we realized there was something going on, and we were off base. We hadn't told anybody, so we drove back up to the gate shack. I had a direct line, called the desk who transferred us to CSC. We briefed them on what was going on. They sent down the security supervisor. He got down to the gate, saw the same things in the forest that we were seeing. He got on the phone, and a decision was made to send him, his rider, and I went and we went out there together, the three of us out into the forest. One of the things that was going on, why we first called it in, and then when he was on the phone, was they started calling. Well, they called our radar, who then they started making phone calls to other radar locations, and it was identified that there was something that had been seen on radar over our location that went down into the forest. So at that point, the shift commander thought or felt that there possibly something had went down or crashed into the forest. And they had notified the British authorities, both the fire department and the police. But we also decided, since it was just outside the gate, to go out and take a look and see what was going on. I'm sorry, you have a question?
Oh, well, I did. I didn't want to cut you off there. How far were you from this object when you felt the electricity in the air? You said that it was almost like time had slowed down for you. How far away were you from the object?
Unknown at that point, because we were just on the road, and whatever it was, we didn't get close enough to it. It was in the forest.
Okay.
We didn't get close enough to it till later when we went out, in the vehicle into the forest itself. So.
Okay.
So from that point, then what we did was we departed the base, went down on a logging road that led into the forest. We could see the lights. People always ask me what I was seeing. I've said from the beginning, it looked like a weird Christmas light display. So, and there was a white light that would seem to be like maybe moving forward and backwards a little bit. We got to a fence where we couldn't drive the vehicle anymore, got out of the vehicle, climbed over the fence, and then went further into the forest. Eventually, after, I don't want to know if I want to call it a cat and mouse game, but it seemed like sometimes we were getting closer to it than we weren't. But we got farther down into the forest where, at the time we didn't know this, but later when we went back and backtracked everything, it was towards the end of the forest line, and then there was another fence line going into a farmer's field. And we came up on a berm, and the lights were still there. As we came up on the berm, and came up to the top of the berm, whatever it was there. And the light got really bright. The three of us hit the ground, and then it seemed to dim and then get bright again and go up and take off. Now, the other two that were with me have different memories of what happened. I don't know. Do you want me to go into those?
Sure.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. The one guy I'll just identify him. The team leader was Staff Sergeant Patterson. It was myself, and then an airman that was his first night on duty, believe it or not, named by the name of Airman Kabansak. He has done a couple interviews a few years ago. He said he remembered we got close to it, and then and both him and Patterson said that I was armed, which I don't. I remembered leaving my weapon at the gate with Stephens, but they both claimed that I was armed. He claimed that I drew my weapon, and then we all blacked out. So that's the initial when we got close to it. Patterson, well, when we got close to it, there was like a more of a static electricity in the air. And I don't know, you asked me how close. We were probably, and it's been like over 40 years, but we were probably 20 yards or less, you know what I mean? But you got to remember now, it was bright light. So, but we were close to it. Patterson says that he actually got up and walked around it, put stuff in his notebook, touched it, and had a binary download. Then it went up, according to him, into the sky. I remember it, the light dimmed and got bright and went back up and then went out towards the coast. So at that point, the three of us went up and over the fence into the farmer's field. We saw something out towards the cottages that were down there. They've called it the farmer's house over the years, but when we went back there a few years ago, that was not the farmer's house. The owner of the property didn't even live there. These were cottages that were down at the end of the field. But we saw like a bluish light down, like down by the farmer or the cottages. I call it the farmer's house. But so at that point, we went across the field towards the cottages. Now, here's what I want to clarify for all these people that have wanted to go with this lighthouse theory over the years. A guy in England came out with it. Well, the issue is, first of all, he first originally tried to say we could see the lighthouse from the back gate, which we couldn't. He then, stated that once, we could see the lighthouse once we went into the field. Well, that's correct. In Ed's and my statement, we both said we saw a beacon when we got down by the cottages. But prior to the cottages, we were in the forest and we didn't see the beacon, and what we encountered was not the lighthouse. So for that's still floating around. He still tries to come around and say it was the lighthouse. We had an encounter with something in the forest before we entered the field. And at that point, we got down by the cottages. We proceeded into a second field. At one point, Patterson split off from us. We continued towards the coast, and we did see some blue lights or a blue light streak across the sky in front of us farther out. And at that point, we eventually got to the coast and looked down, and that's when we identified the beacon for sure for what it was, which was the lighthouse. Now, we can go deeper into this later, but the lighthouse may have played a part in all this, but not the way the one guy, Ridpath, tried to say it did. But anyway, so at that point, we had lost radio contact on and off during the whole event. And at one point, when we got back, when we met back up with the team that was out there waiting for us, they even said they lost contact with us for 45 minutes. And our watches were 45 minutes slow. So they were 45 minutes behind what the current time was.
So we've talked to people that have had interactions with entities, if they have had more than, two people there, and people tend to have different experiences or their stories don't collaborate very well. Like they almost need hypnosis and stuff like that to sort of recount the events, especially if there's missing time and all that. Is that something that the group ever considered as well, just to figure out exactly what happened during those 40 minutes? Or is that just something that you have explored yourself, but the rest of the group aren't interested?
I don't believe Ed did. I mean, he may have, but he never really, never told me he did. Ed went on a documentary, and right after the documentary, the IRS showed up, I guess. And that's according to what he said, and it spooked him, and he believed that because he talked about the incident, the government was coming after him. So he's kind of went quiet since then. I did go under hypnosis, which was bizarre what came out, and then Patterson also did go under hypnosis.
Nice. And when you hear stories, because I think 9 years later, it was Bob Lazar's story that came out when he's saying that the government has 9 of these crafts. He's worked on some of them. So you start hearing this sort of stuff as the decades go along. It sort of validates your story as well, because you guys went through, medical issues because of this close proximity. We were talking the other night, actually, Louie and I, with Richard Dolan, which was really excited that you were coming on the podcast, and we were talking about how the report that
Cash Landrum, I think, right? That story with the families.
Yes, but also we were talking about how the UFO report had no mention. It said that there was no medical issues between UAPs and pilots or UAP so far, and we say that's not true. There's been
but to be fair to that report, which I didn't agree with a lot of it either, but it only went back 15 years.
Right.
They did not, and then there's been some people come out then because of what happened with me and the government and the VA, and said, well, but I got my settlement what would be 7 years ago, 8 years ago now, was the 15 January of 15. So, but the actuality is the report was a small portion was declassified of it. So they never really did clarify what cases they looked at, what, how far back they went at. So it's up in the air as far as that part of it, as far as I'm concerned. It's clear that there was a cover up with what happened to me. My records are classified, both my personnel records and my medical records are classified still to this day. When I started having medical, I had them right afterwards. People always ask. I didn't feel well afterwards, and when I PCS back to the States, I got sick again, and went to the emergency room because I was back home visiting a couple hours away from the base and I wasn't going to be able to drive back. So they told me to go to the emergency room. Just military was like that, to verify I was sick. And when I went in the emergency room, he asked me about my heart murmur. And I said, I don't have one. And then they said, well, yeah, you do. And it's a big one. So I went back to the base with all the documentation. They brought a specialist in right away from Patterson. It's interesting enough, you find out years later is where a lot of stuff goes on with all this stuff. So he came in and evaluated me like a day later. And I got back one day and he was there the next day. And then he told me to pack my bags. I was going to Patterson the next day. So they set me up there and they did a bunch of tests. And that's one of the things that's classified. They won't reveal what they learned from my, from the tests they did on my heart. So my records are classified. They denied me disability and stuff. And they actually, in the letter, they said I wasn't even in the Air Force from 79 to 82 when all this supposedly happened, and was able to prove eventually Senator McCain was involved, that I was. So then they had to go back and say, okay, well, he was, now we'll take a closer look. And then supposedly they were going to take care of it. Then they denied everything again, which led to an IG complaint, and McCain got personally involved to include us threatening to open up hearings on the whole thing. And then magically after that, and the interesting thing about any veterans that listen to this that have had issues with the VA, from beginning to end, it only took me 2.5 years to get rated and get my disability, which is unheard of. Unless, for example, you're in a combat zone and you get severely injured. But for something that happened over 30 years ago, I got completely rated and taken care of within 2.5 years. And the other thing is that to this day, only certain doctors can deal with me in the VA with my heart. But then the civilian side, they'll do community and the care, and I can have most everything else done other than my eyes, and my heart has to be handled through the VA.
Really? How old were you when this incident took place and you had the heart murmur? Like you were in your 20s at that point?
I would have been 20 when the event happened.
Yeah. And
they
if you
found it right before my birthday, on my 21st birthday.
And if you had the heart murmur as a pre-existing medical condition, you wouldn't be in the military at that point.
No, you couldn't get it. Matter of fact, quick story. When I got out of active, I had 9 years. I wanted to go in the reserves, but the way I got out, there was nothing open for the reserves, so I had to wait a while. When I went back in to try to go in the reserves, they initially denied me to come back into the reserves because of my heart murmur. And they showed me the reg, and I just looked at it and I said, well, I like a copy of it. And he goes, why? I go, I'm going to go to my senator, because I said, I don't understand how I could have it after I came in, which happened to me when I was in, and then turn around and stay in, but now you're denying me access back in. And then they backtracked. They made a couple of phone calls, and he came back and they did the physical and they allowed me back in the reserves. So no, you could not have entered the Air Force with the heart murmur, which is one of what the debunkers tried to say, that I probably had it before I came in. And actually, that's one of the few things I did have was my entry level physical that showed a clean bill of health. And then my exit physical in 1988 showing I had all kinds of heart issues. So.
Yeah, and I can relate to that myself. I had a heart murmur as a younger person. I had to go see a special doctor. I ran track and field in school. They were concerned there was an issue, so I went to a cardiologist. Basically, a heart murmur is where you have a valve that doesn't close completely, and it's not a perfect seal, and the blood makes a bit of a squishing noise when listened to through a stethoscope or whatever. But I actually outgrew mine because I did a physical when I was in elementary, and they said it wasn't severe. I could participate in sports, played hockey, track and field. And in high school, when I made like the collegiate team, they actually required a sign off from a doctor because I disclosed I had this pre-existing condition. And I went to another cardiologist and they couldn't find it. They're like, you don't have a heart murmur. So that's kind of a weird thing that can come. Oh, mind you, I was still a maturing pubescent teenager. So I was growing, and maybe that corrected it.
I can actually add more to this. Eventually, with all this stuff going on with McCain, well, first with Kyle, then he retired in McCain, and then a CIA guy showed up when all this started getting hot, and gave some documentation for the help the VA and the DoD take care of my heart. One of the interesting things was when I had my surgery, they replaced the valve, and the civilian doctors couldn't figure out what was going on because my symptoms didn't match what they were seeing in the echo for the damage to the heart. And you know how private insurances are not wanting to do certain things when there's not enough evidence. Anyway, long story short, when they actually did the surgery, they found that I had 2 leaflets, and the damage was on inside leaflet, which is rare to ever have any issues, which is hard to find anyway. But I had 2 leaflets. So basically, what I was told was whatever happened to me, if I hadn't had those 2 leaflets, because normally you only have one, I probably would have died in the field.
Oh,
Yeah, it
Whatever
saved
we
you.
were exposed to. Yeah, so because the 2 leaflets were both damaged, but they worked together to, even though after I had the damage that kept me along forever, but they were both disintegrating to the point where I was within a month of dying when everything finally got taken care of and I had my surgery. So.
Well,
that's
I'm
crazy.
glad that you made it through all right. But I wanted to ask you just about these medical effects, because again, this is hotly contested. A lot of people, say that there's no such thing. A lot of people swear by it, and you're a good example of it. So did anybody else have this type of thing? And how long after? Like, because we've heard of, incident cases where people go home, they feel sick right away, their hair falls out, their teeth start to loosen, symptoms of extreme radiation poisoning.
Well,
Don't often hear the cardiological
the
ramifications.
problem is that it wasn't the type of radiation you would expect. It was terahertz radiation, which is a different thing. And the other thing is, there's the other guy that was with me on night 3, which I'm sure we're going to get into. He actually is rated 100% just like I am. So there's 2 of us that have been rated, and no matter what people try to say, okay, if people understand how the VA works, it has to be in the line of duty. You have to identify where it happened and the symptoms, and everything else. His and mine were both presented to the VA that we were injured in the line of duty in the fields at Bentwaters, or outside of Woodbridge Air Force Base in Rendlesham Forest. And the VA acknowledged both of us received injuries from that event. So what they didn't do was say what it was. In fact, I was told very clearly from the DOD, the VA, and even the senator's office is that I deserved the care I got for the injuries I sustained from that event, but I was never going to be told what it was, period. It was the case was closed. In fact, I got a letter from the DOD afterwards, because we had FOIA out that they broke the law on. They wouldn't answer questions about classified records and everything else. And once they rated me, they came back and told me, we're done. We're going to treat you. We'll take care of you. Certain things will be done that'll still remain, within the realms of classification. And we're not going to answer any more of your FOIA questions. And people claim there's always just a big debate on that. Even when I first started talking about this, when we did that mock hearing with Steve Bassett, citizens hearing, even the senators, and I should say the one senator knew, and the one congressman knew. The rest of them didn't know about a classified record section in our government, and also didn't understand that if you're involved in a classified event, your records are classified and you don't have access to them. I just don't have a right to them like anybody else does.
Did that make it difficult if they were classifying your information for the VA to give you compensation for this?
Well, it was a double-edged sword, because yes, some of the things that they couldn't look at, and what happened was when they did the second denial, and then the office that was handling it came back and told the staffer Cheryl Bennett, who got a lot of this done, and got most of it done under. People understand the senator doesn't do the work, the aides do, and she did it all, but he did get involved at the end, was that they couldn't look at my stuff. And they had to bring in a special employee that had classifications. But when he got to the point on my heart, even his classification, and he had the highest rating in it, couldn't look at it. So it did make an issue. But the bigger issue was that they modified my DD-4 214 and said I wasn't even in.
Yeah.
So they denied that I was in for 3 years. And we had to fight that, even though we had some proof that I was. They still denied it. So they were clearly covering up what took place in that field. I mean, even all my personnel records were missing when we got some of them eventually. We're all missing from 79 to 82. Everything was scrubbed.
That's systematic too. Again, Jason, you mentioned Bob Lazar, but there's a lot of similarities there too. Nobody can find his info. They deny he ever worked there. I mean, this is not
Well, yeah,
one.
but and I'm not bagging on Bob Lazar, but in my case, I have the proof.
Yeah.
There's a
Mhm.
difference.
Yeah.
He claims they can't, and I'm not saying he doesn't have any proof at all, but I can show the denial letters. I can
Yeah.
show the DD Form 214 that they tried to stand by saying I wasn't in. I can show the fact that my records are classified. So that's the difference between some other people is there's no denying it. They
Yeah.
classified it. Now, what I can't show is what happened to us as far as what they deemed, why they felt it was necessary to rape me and treat me and keep everything classified. I mean, what's sitting in front of you was obviously because there's a declassified British document that we use, Project Condign, that said we were exposed to UAP radiation. So, but the bottom line is they've never admitted to what injured us. They've just admitted we were injured and they were going to take care of us.
Yeah. So we got through day one of the Rendlesham incident. And as you mentioned, it's like a 3-day saga. So let's pick up from there if we can. What happened on day two? And sort of the Colonel Holt gets involved.
Well, day two was the second night, and Colonel Holt, there is some evidence that he may have even went out there on night two, but I wasn't involved in night two. We went on break after our event, so we were off 3 days. And on night two, the flight that replaces our midnight shift saw strange lights. The story I've got, which I didn't get it straight from the horse's mouth, but I actually found out about it right after it happened. I went up to the desk that morning before they got off, and the desk sergeant, I knew him, said that they were out in the forest. We saw strange lights again, and the shift commander had something happen to her where this blue light went through her vehicle and shut it off, and she freaked out and was relieved of duty. So there was an interaction on night two. Night three is the night after I found out about night two, where me and a couple of the guys I was working with on flight decided to go back out there to see if we could figure out what was going on. Unbeknownst, they were already back out there with another event going on. And that ended up getting us sucked into that event, which there's a tape Colonel Holt made that some of it's been released. Some people claim that that's the whole tape, but there's more to tape. It was just edited. There's more to what went on. So, and there was also a command post tape that was recorded of everything that night that's classified that you can't listen to. But at the end of the day, when I met up with them, they'd already had an encounter. You can hear it on the tape. You hear them identify to them that I was out there. We eventually met up with them. For years, Holt denied that I was even there. And then the tape got out, and then he had to admit we were there. And then Bastenza and I went forward because whatever was going on that night, as far as prior, something strange came down out of the sky into the tree line in front of us. So he allowed him and I to go forward so I could get a closer look. And as we were going towards it, it started to come towards us. And as we were both running, we got close to it. Now, I just remember getting close to it and then it was gone. The guy with me, Bastenza, who also got raided, like I did, he got knocked down to the ground. I remember him going down to the ground. He said something held him down, and then he saw it come over me and I disappeared. And then it actually he didn't go into it, but a little bit of it he had on his hand, so he had a little bit of a contact with it, but didn't go into it and disappear like I did. Or that's what he remembers. So
let's talk about physical and forensic traces that this thing or things left. I mean, I've read reports that there was like abrasions on the trees, 3.5 feet high, indentations from what would be like foot pads in like a tripod formation. I think they even cut the grass after the incident happened so people wouldn't come take pictures.
No, the forest got destroyed by a weird hurricane event. It was like hurricane winds that happened like a couple of years later or whatever. I don't know. So like you don't get letters from people telling you exactly what date it was. What I know is after our event, the forest got leveled by a windstorm. So, and I don't know how long after, but it did. But there were tripods found in the ground, which interesting enough, and we can go into this a little bit, we have some time, because the book I did, Weaponization of the UAP, we've identified probably what a lot of we've dealt with out there, what was going on. They were testing top secret military weaponry and stuff too. But there's also a phenomenon that's been identified in the area that they were working on. There was a team down there that the guy wrote a book and pulled it. They were down there studying. They call it a phenomenon, but now it's been identified as a UAP. But they were studying that. They were actually working on it, and they were working on 3 different facilities. We're working on some technology down there. But this UAP type object could create those indentations, and it also would leave traces of radiation, but not in the sense of, like if there was a nuclear explosion or something like that.
Yeah, like the foot pads would have higher readings on the Geiger counter, but
Well,
everything
that's
around
exactly,
it.
if you listen to the tape, that's what Halt said. And again, I can only go off what he's talked about over the years and what the tape says, but there's been people trying to dispute that also. Like the equipment wasn't the right equipment,
Sure.
the indentations were damaged from something else, and the damage to the trees, but they never really could claim how the tree canopy above us was on the floor.
Yeah.
So something brought down some of the tree canopy above us. So again, I don't have a problem. Skeptics are fine. I don't like the bunkers only because they've got a narrative that's it, and all they're going to do is try to destroy anything of value.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. So I don't have a problem with some of the skeptics questioning. They even question about my injuries that could have happened prior. And no. And I've actually presented in some presentations enough proof to show that the documentation and then Billy Cox was a reporter in Florida at the time. We sent him the settlement, and he wrote an article on it, and he verified, that it was from that incident, and the evidence that we presented was from that incident. So, but there's still people out there questioning that. But one of the other issues that I had and Adrian had was eye issues, and I actually have a hole in my eye wall from radiation damage.
Wow.
Which is
Probably from the intensity of the light, or who
again,
knows?
they don't. Okay, trying to get something out of the government's impossible. The most I got out of my eye doctor was, well, when I first started having the eye issues, I got sent to Wilford Hall, and the doctor asked me if I'd been exposed to radiation, and then I said, not that I'm aware of, because I wasn't aware of it at that point. And it was till years later we started putting it all together. But then further on over the years now, the doctor's given me some little bits of information about what's going on, because I have to go back and have my eye wall looked at every 6 months, and it's never changed, and there's scarring in there from radiation exposure.
Another interesting point on these, where Rendlesham Forest was right in between 2 bases, right? Bentwaters and Woodbridge, very important NATO allied bases in the time of the Cold War. And there was rumor that they had nuclear ordnance on there. I don't think it's ever been officially confirmed, but what are your thoughts on the fact that these were nuclear bases, hence the interest from potential UAP?
Well, what I can tell you is this: prior to us getting there, they had F4s on alert at Woodbridge, and it's been openly talked about everywhere that there were nuclear weapons, armed on the planes. They left and the A-10s came in. I can't go into exactly what we had when I was there because we had to sign documents, and I don't know the shelf life of it. But the fact of the matter is that if you look at the facilities that were there, it was nuclear capable, and to store nuclear weapons there. And the other factor is that people claim that we couldn't have them there, but that's not true. Because if you go back and look at the NATO, we were a NATO base. We were not a British or American base. We were a NATO base. And if you go back and look at the NATO charter, all through Europe, Germany, and other European countries, we had nuclear weapons that were under the NATO charter and treaty. So yes, nuclear weapons were authorized in the UK, Germany, and all these other countries. They just cleverly moved stuff around, which led to people challenging the fact that we weren't even supposed to have anything there, which we could have.
And you'd think that a plane carrying nuclear weapons would have to take off and land at facilities capable of holding the payload. I don't think they park airplanes and leave the nuclear bomb strapped to the belly. Again, I don't know. I'm not a military expert, but you would think that if it's a place that is going to add or remove a warhead, they need a place to store it. Therefore, the base is a nuclear base, quote unquote, because the planes need to be able to.
Like I said, I could tell you what was going on prior to the A-10s. I can't tell you what our mission was after.
Sure.
But I can just tell you they're called WSA, weapon storage areas, and we had two of them, one on Woodbridge and one on Belmars. And that's as far as I can go. But do I think what was going on had anything to do with the nuclear weapons? No. Not at all. Matter of fact, if you were to get the book and read it, they were doing the technology they were working on then, it's evolved over the years, would make nuclear weapons obsolete with what they've been working on, what we have capabilities now. So
yeah, I watched you on another podcast. You were talking about cloaking and plasmas and all that sort of jazz as well. Were they working on those sort of?
Oh yeah, that's where it all started. In fact, if you go back and look at it, what was going on? They had MK Ultra going on in the States and some other stuff going on that they got caught with. Now Congress was involved. Things got really hot, and so what they did was they shut all these programs down in the United States, and then they moved them over under a different mission over into the UK. And they also had the facilities over there, which most people don't understand that area where we were at. Orford Nest, they developed nuclear stuff there. They worked on all kinds of, they were working on the death ray, which you know what that is, right? Lasers and stuff.
Yeah.
And then they found radar. So they had lasers there, they had radar there, the original radar stuff that they built. And when I said earlier the lighthouse was probably involved, it actually was. One of the things they were working on was they had the original radar facility hooked to the lighthouse that was beaming EM frequencies into the forest.
Oh, really?
Yes, and they were working on all kinds of radar technology to include this guy by the name of Andrew Pike that was working with, and he always gets mad at me, but it was funded by the government through his university, which they do all the time. They were working on studying of the phenomenon that was there, and they were working on it through these facilities. And they also were, let's see how I want to put this. If you go back and look at the history, Marconi was the company at the time. They've been bought out, it's BA Systems now, but at the time it was Marconi, and there actually was scientists that were down there working on SDI, and people have challenged that. Well, that didn't happen until Reagan. No, SDI was being worked on at the time of that event. Reagan was the one that wanted to take it out of the R&D, and the testing and make it operational. So it was already being worked on, which is what was moved over there. They had all the best radars over there at the time too. So they were working on all this, including the plasmas. And one of the things that we found out was a guy that I'm working with, and it's interesting, you guys are going on that network, the X with Race Hobbs, right?
Yeah.
Well, we're doing a show. I'm doing a show with Race and James Warrow,
Nice.
who is the researcher, and we're going to expose all this further from the book about the technology. But those actual blue lights were probably plasmas that were created from the phenomenon that were being controlled by lasers in the sky that Halton and a bunch of us saw, and what was going on. And that other stuff that we got mixed into probably was something that came from the phenomenon itself. Which, do we know exactly what the phenomenon is? No, other than what was declassified in Condign, which says it's under intelligent control, and the final report part of it said it should be weaponized.
Now let's talk about your book, Weaponization of an Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, because that's essentially where you guys go, topic-wise.
Yes, I've done a deep dive because Halt, Peniston, and all those guys retired like in the early 90s. I stayed in until 2004. So I was involved with special operations for Bosnia and the Second Gulf War. And when I was involved with both, I saw certain things that I can't talk about, but made me wonder about, wait a minute, that kind of fits into what was going on at Bentwaters. And then I started digging a little bit. And then when I got sick, I dug really deep and found out a bunch of stuff. And then from there, I met James Warrow, who is a great researcher that's dug into a ton of technology and different things that are going on. And one of the biggest things that these debunkers like to say is, well, we didn't have that stuff back then. Oh, yes, we did. We were so much farther advanced than anybody knew in 1980. And it's just mind-boggling probably where we are today.
Right. And psychologically, because, physically you've had issues with this, you've had two incidences pretty much like a night apart. And you're the only person that I know that has had close encounters that much, in proximity to these crafts, basically, 2 nights in a row, not in a row, but, one night apart. Psychologically, what does that do to somebody, especially when you're in the Air Force and you're dealing with something like that? Everything gets classified, you're getting sick. Like that must have played with your head quite a bit at that point. I mean, you were young, when this happened, but, over 43 years now, what did you find that was the hardest to struggle with?
For me, okay, it was my first base. I wasn't in charge that night. I didn't have to talk much. You know, I gave a written statement that eventually got released. I was kind of told it was being taken care of. Don't worry about it. We'll let you know if we need anything. And just, I wouldn't say we were threatened to be quiet, but we were just told to be quiet. When you're standing as an E3 in front of a colonel and he says, well, we're looking into this, leave it alone. Okay, fine. And I couldn't explain it. And that's why I laugh today. Like these guys that are having these encounters today, I don't know. Maybe they don't know, because we didn't know, but we weren't at the level of a pilot, you know what I mean, and stuff. But our technology is being evolved, by the month. Never mind all these think tanks, what they're looking to the future and stuff. So if I had like a dollar for every time I heard that couldn't have been us, I'd be rich by now, because honestly, I didn't know what to make of it. This was before the internet and everything else. It could have been from somewhere else. Well, yeah, we thought about that, but I was told to shut up. I just shut up, and I left the base. Now, I didn't feel well over there, but never really correlated being not feeling well to what happened to us. Nor when I did go in was I ever asked about it, or like that. And even after I had more issues going forward, it never was brought up, the event. Now, it did follow me around because other people that I was stationed with, a couple of different bases I was at, and they were running their mouths about it. So people were running to me. And the most interesting story was when the story finally got leaked out, was I was at Luke. That was my third assignment. And the phone starts ringing off the hook, my home phone. I don't even know how they got my number, because I wasn't on the phone. Back then they had phone books. It was on my roommate's name, not mine, but they found me. And I was like blowing them off, hanging them up, telling them I'm not going to talk to them. It was from all over, Nebraska, Europe, and all that. And then CNN called. And it was like, okay, now I got a problem. So I went to the base, and I went to public affairs, and I walked in the office, and I didn't really know what to tell her. She was sitting at this, buck sergeant sitting at the desk. I needed to talk to the officer in charge of public affairs here. She's like, well, he's at lunch. What do you need? I said, well, all I can tell you is this. I wrote down the date, and I wrote down the base. I said, he needs to call the Pentagon because I've been contacted by CNN about an event that took place. And she goes, what? I go, can't tell you. She's like, what? I go, I'm not supposed to talk about it. So he needs to call, and they'll tell you what you need to know. So I went home. I went to work, went home. Next day I come in and I'm arming up to go to work. I get pulled out. I quick arm up and taken into the skiff where the Pentagon was on the phone with me. I had a general on the phone, and a guy that had been the shift commander over there was now at the Pentagon in public affairs. And we discussed everything and how and what I could say and what I could do with CNN. And so for me, I let it go. I was told not to worry about it, and I couldn't explain it. And back then, even today, you still get weird looks, but back then, you didn't really go around talking about that stuff.
Yeah.
And I didn't. And I wasn't worried about my career. I just didn't know what to say. How do you say you don't know what it is, what it was, what went on, but I always would get cornered sooner or later in different places. And then after the story broke, I got shipped out to Korea, hidden over there. Halt was over there, and so was Williams. So we were all three of us were hid over there for over a year to keep us from the press from that point.
Oh,
So,
really?
So do you think most of these, because I know you've mentioned that, hey, we had crazier tech than we think, even in the 80s. So do you think a lot of the cases, like what's the percentage? I know that's a difficult thing to answer, but do you think it's 50-50, sort of our tech versus outside tech? Do you think there's a small chance it's not from us? What are your thoughts on the whole man-made versus ET craft?
well, what I can tell you is, and we're continuing to dig and we're going to evolve with this, is there is a phenomenon out there. Now, if you listen, did you just see that interview the CIA guy did, ex-CIA Brennan did? And he said there's something going on, but it's not what you think it is. And all these different people that I've been around high up in government that I've been able to speak to, some physicists and stuff, is you get the sense that there's something there, but it's not what we've had been told, like little spaceship coming from Zeta Reticuli and stuff, and that they definitely know about it and they've been studying it. The Condon report says it's there, it's viable, we need to weaponize it. That's hence the name of the book, Weaponization, and we've laid out a lot of stuff that we've uncovered, and we're continuing to cover more stuff. So my thing is this, there's something there. So some of the time it could be it, including we probably had an interaction with both what we were trying to create and what was there. Do you know what I mean? And from there, they've evolved all this technology to, it could easily be explained if you could get to the right documents. And all we can look at is declassified documents and weaponry. So we don't have the nuts and bolts of everything, but a lot of what's been seen on radar and stuff can be explained. Do you know what I mean? And the interesting thing that stands out on two things of this. Number one is that these encounters that happened with the with the Navy were both by areas that had the technology that could create those effects. That down there on Catalina Island and off the coast of Florida, and over in the Middle East. Okay, so there's technology out there that can create a lot of this and create these countermeasures and stuff, different things. So that's very viable, as far as that goes on. And there's no doubt that they're continuing to work on this, because do you remember the question at the hearing where they asked the guy that was giving the briefing, he said, are we developing technology off of UAPs? And they said, we can't talk about that. We have to go behind closed doors. Well, I also did FOIA with the MOD based on some stuff I had, and they told me they've developed technology off of UAPs, but it was all blacked out and it's all classified. And they gave me it's in the book exactly what went on, and they've even admitted that they're working on something. So it's probably a combination of both. How much I can't tell you, but if you're around a military facility or something happens around a military facility that has advanced weaponry, you can be the judge of,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's weird that as a species, we always look at how can we use this technology to kill people. Like every single time that we come up with some new technology, like the stuff that leaked down, like microwaves, and that we now have in our homes, all these things were all made eventually by the Army and designed to, like, how can we use this to kill people? And with this technology, it's the same thing. Even if it was a peaceful, let's say, species that comes and visits us, and occasionally something crashes, we get that information, or that that craft, we try to reverse engineer it. We're going to try to reverse engineer it to how can we use it to kill people or get the advantage on somebody else. And that's a really big problem with our species, because I think we're never.
Well, that's not really fair, because you're not, it's not species driven, it's people that we put in charge.
Yeah.
That and that the military's job is to do that.
Right.
And not only that, but then you have to look at the people, these corporations that have evolved over the years, that their job is to stay ahead of, because what people don't understand, there's an industrial military complex, but there's all kinds of stuff that goes on between countries and militaries, but also within these industries too. There's all kinds of espionage and stuff that goes on with these companies, because a lot of the stuff has been farmed from the military to hide it inside these companies. And that's one of the things I got from the British, was part of the reason why we can't tell you anything is it's in the defense industry. It's not even we don't even own it. It's owned by these companies and stuff. So it's not us as a species. It's the people that are in charge and the people that want to have the power. So, because I don't think you and I want to destroy each other, and I don't think I really have a problem with these other countries, because I've been in a lot of these countries where the people are fine. It's the governments that have caused the problem.
Right.
Good point.
Yeah, I was going to say that with that, even we were talking previously about there's a new group now investigating UFOs, but the old group that's been around forever trying to keep this silent, they're not just going to dissipate. They're not just going to disappear in the night. They're still active. They change their ways. They change their tactics. But when you hear events that took place right before the internet, everybody says, you know, I got visited by people. They would raid my house or they would mess with me. Like we've heard that time and again from different people. That didn't happen to you? Like nobody messed with you in any way?
No, I was put through a debriefing, you know, as far as went in right afterwards, talked to the shift commander, then spoke to the wing hierarchy. Some of the people that were there, it depends on who it is. Some of them vividly remember being brought in and interrogated. Patterson's kind of up in the air because his initial story was that he talked to Halt about it a lot, but didn't remember any of the other stuff until he went under hypnosis, and then he remembered being interrogated. So that's kind of iffy on him. I can't give you a straight answer on what really happened with him. I do not remember being interrogated, or the closest I ever came to any of this was at the beginning was with when I got the Pentagon called me at my base and told me what I could and couldn't say. And then when these people from government showed up after it became a bigger deal about my injuries in the cover up. So, but I've never been like threatened other than, I guess the closest I could come is that when they gave me what I wanted, I was told kind of let it go.
Right.
Go, we're taking care of you, now shut your mouth.
Right.
You know, it wasn't that, it was subtly done. It wasn't that direct, but it was kind of like, look, dude, you know, we're done. We're not telling you anymore, and don't expect any more from us.
Did
That's messed up.
anything, you mentioned you had 45 minutes lost time. Did anything come out during your hypnotherapy regressions about that missing time?
Yeah, there's a lot to the hypnosis that's bizarre. The interesting thing is that I kind of leave it with the hypnosis is that during the hypnosis, and the weird thing is that it's possible, but it's not probable that I actually was communicating with whatever it was that was there. But the actual, what was there wasn't like a physical, it was energy, that the blue lights were the light forms itself. And the communications that I was doing with during the hypnosis was through those, which would call a life form, but it wasn't like a physical person like I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
It was an energy. And the interesting thing is that it's possible that this is where it gets complicated, that even what was going on may have been my own consciousness from the future coming back. So it's just what came out, and it was evaluated by the intelligence agencies, and they believe it. Because I've gotten told that more than once when I've spoken with some people about it, and they brought me in to talk to me about it. And one of the things that people don't understand when we're talking about technology, people think that time has to be where you travel forward and back, right? You can actually have do you know what time dilation is?
We've covered a little bit of it. And,
Yeah.
Yeah,
in
you can
proximity to
actually,
it,
it can actually still be here, but just in a little bit, being a little slower.
yeah.
Then so you can't, that's just as easy as you can put it, where you can have things going on around you that are here but they're just a little bit slower in the timeline. And that's one of the weapons they're working on, is to be able to cloak. So cloaking is where you slow down the time field that it's in with plasmas, and it disappears. But it's there, but it's not there because it's in a different timeline. But not different timeline, but in the timeline, but it's just slower in the timeline itself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very
when-
interesting stuff. And then you have time slips where people go to like Union Station and it looks like the 20s and everybody's dressed like the 20s. And then
Well,
5
see, that's
seconds
going
later,
back. That's going back and forth in time. what I'm getting at is there could be stuff here right among us. Remember how Bigelow said they're here and among us?
Yeah.
They could be here, but you just can't see them because of that distortion. And the reason why these sensors and stuff are starting to pick up some of this stuff is because they've gotten to the point where they can pick up different types of dilation and stuff like that.
Do you think
Just
that's
like
maybe how
infrared
these,
can pick it up.
do you think maybe that's how they travel because they're manipulating time and space?
I don't know. You'd have to talk to it. You know, that we're working on that. We're trying to get some viable answers. But yeah, it could be that, you know, they could be doing both.
Yeah.
But the time dilation is real. Okay. That's just a fact. Whether we could time travel forward or back, I don't know. You know, they're working on it. They're working on being able to, DARPA's working on being able to do like they did in Star Trek, where you transport from one area to another. They're working on telepathy, communications. This is all stuff it's actually being worked on, not just on the drawing board. So are they probably working with these EM frequencies and stuff on time travel? Yeah. But the difference is for sure time dilation is real. And it explains a lot of things that why they could be here and we could not be seeing them for real.
So do you think you being in close proximity to this light source, you entered maybe that field, because people are saying you've been gone for 40 minutes.
They could have created that. Our government may have been able to create a time dilation bubble, yes.
Okay.
Where we went inside a bubble where everything was different.
Right. And did you feel that?
Well, if you think about it, we went into a bubble that was slower than the real bubble where we were. So that could explain why we were 45 minutes slow.
Right. And was this light conscious? Like, did you feel there was a consciousness to it, or did it just seem like it was just a light source?
When I was there, I didn't get that feeling, but under hypnosis, yeah, I did. In other words, it comes out that they were communicating with us while we were out there. But again, I want to be clear about this so this doesn't blow up. There's a difference between what you remember and what hypnosis says.
Yeah, right.
But I could tell you that the intelligence agencies have reviewed this hypnosis tape and they believe it's viable.
That's crazy. And the fact that you have to go to Wright-Patterson Air Force, just so I got this straight, you got to go to Wright-Patterson Air Force for the heart, or just the VA for the heart?
No, I had to go to Wright-Patterson. That's where they evaluated me after I got sick.
That's
and then
crazy.
Wolford Hall evaluated my eyes.
Oh,
that's
wow.
where I went to. Wolford Hall is the main, it's like, you know, it's the main hospital for the Air Force. And then Wright-Patterson at the time didn't know it, but it's where supposedly these people claim that there's all kinds of testing and work going on with this type of technology.
Right. And it would have interest in your case if you came close to either one, their technology, or another technology from somewhere
one would
else,
say
right?
probably, because why are my records classified otherwise?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Yeah.
And you can't go to a regular doctor that may start talking. You need
well,
to go
I
to
actually that's the strange thing. Okay, a couple of things that happened just recently. The VA's having trouble with keeping doctors. So where I live, it's not a big metropolitan area, so I have to go to Danville for cardiologists, and they keep quitting. So they tried to put me in community care, but when I went and saw the civilian cardiologist, they gave him 2 pages or 3 pages of what currently was going on, but they wouldn't let him do an echo or do anything else. So he tried to change everything. He had to resubmit it to him. So they pulled me off, and they got a doctor read in down at Danville that I could see that could continue to treat my heart. And then when I got COVID last year, you know how they do echoes on your heart afterwards? The VA wouldn't allow the civilian hospital to do it. I had to go down to the VA a couple of weeks later and have my heart checked out that way.
Wow. So they do have control over what medical procedures are being done. Like, they seem to have an oversight on it.
On my heart and eyes, yes.
Yeah.
My heart and eyes, I cannot see civilians.
Wow.
Which is crazy, because an EKG is just a piece of paper reading.
No, it's not an EKG, it's an echocardiogram.
Oh, echocardiogram. Okay, ECG. But still, like, you wouldn't think that it would be that damning of evidence unless there's clearly something anomalous about your heart rate or the damage to your eye. It would be something that a normal doctor might almost look at and say, what the hell is this? I've never seen anything like it. And maybe this is just me guessing, but
well,
maybe
I can't speak for the heart, but I can speak for the eye, because when I was out in Arizona, so I was very tightly controlled at bigger facilities. But when I moved back to Illinois, they don't have that type of facilities. So the very first time I went in to be evaluated. Well, first of all, they didn't want to release me from Arizona to here. And so when the lady called me back, I was laughing. I said, "Are they going to pay travel pay for me to go back up to Arizona every year?" She goes, "That's a good point." She got back to me a day later and says, "They're going to sign you over to us." So when I went down to my heart, I had to go see the chief of cardiology in Indianapolis. He handles everything through their other cardiologists. Well, for my eye, I went in to see, and the first time the eye doctor is looking at my eye, and she stops and she starts looking and puts these drops in and gets really into it. And she goes, "Hold on, I have to leave the room." And she left the room and was gone like 30 minutes, came back. She said, "Okay, I know what's going on now." She said, "So you're going to be farmed over to Peoria and they'll take care of you from now on." So she saw something in my eye that was there that they don't want. They couldn't stop me from going to an eye doctor or even a cardiologist, but they wouldn't know the symptoms. That's why I had certain things done before the VA got in the middle of it with my heart that didn't need to be done the first time because they couldn't figure it out. So I don't know what it is, but there's something there that they don't want the general, the regular doctors to know about.
And John, is it which eye is it that she freaked out about?
My right.
Your right eye? Okay.
That's
right.
where the hole in the eye wall is.
Right.
Stuff. So.
And when you were near this craft, were you closer on the right-hand side to it, or were you facing it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we were face to face with it. We hit the ground. So I don't know what I did. Right. I don't remember either time what I did as we got close to it. Everything's kind of a blur still to this day.
Well, John, your story is amazing. And, we're full believers in what happened because 43 years later, you're still singing the same tune and you're sticking to your guns, and you've had all these incidences that are proven. Your book proves that as well. Louis, do you have any final questions for our guest
let's
today?
just mention John's books. So you're obviously in the book that you co-wrote with Nick Pope, Encounter in Rendlesham Forest, but also Weaponization of an Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon. Where else can people find your information, or where can they follow you?
I don't have a web page. I have a Facebook page. So if you want to come on there, I put stuff on there. We're going to be on the X. So we're getting ready to do our first. We've been replaying the old Phenomenal radio show I used to do with Linda Moulton Howe, but we're going to start doing mini documentaries presenting evidence and stuff. So we'll be on the X. So you can go through YouTube on the X or through the X or through my Facebook page, John F. Burroughs. So other than that, that's pretty much it for me, getting a hold of me. And the book's available on Amazon. So
awesome. And we are very excited to join the X Network as well. It's been a long time coming. We were selective on who we wanted to work with, and they're a phenomenal program. Again, their website is unxnetwork.com. And after February 12th, UAP Studies Podcast will be featured. We'll have our own page. And again, for our own show right now, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and that type of thing, Facebook, Twitter. But wanted to say thank you very much, John Burroughs. It's awesome to talk to you. We can tell, at least my BS filter says this is legit. I don't feel like you've embellished anything. I've heard you speak many other times. It's basically the same every time. I don't think you're in this for the credit, or you want to be a big shot celebrity. You just want the story to be known. And there's probably a lot of other people that are similar or had similar experiences that maybe don't feel as comfortable, but you're an inspiration to those people.
There are people that still deserve to be taken care of that were injured over there. And for me, I don't mind talking about it, but I want the story from my perspective out there. That's what I've always wanted. And no, I'm not looking to get famous and stuff or anything like that, but I'm also trying to help some other people that deserve care like Adrian and I got. Never mind trying to work with Congress and some other things right now that we're doing, plus put out more information to let the public decide, what we're dealing with, not only at Bentwaters, but maybe what we're dealing with today.
Yeah. Nicely said. Well, thank you so much for coming on the UAP Studies Podcast, John. We appreciate it. Hopefully this is not the only time. Let's have you back on again. Maybe we're thinking about doing panels in the future. It'd be great to have you on a panel with other experts as well.
That would be great. Thanks. Appreciate it, guys. Have a great rest of your weekend. Thanks.
You too, sir.